Hello everyone, welcome back to the Analyst. I hope you all are doing well. This is 27th January 2024 and we will be looking at the most important articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express today. The very first article is regarding the recent visit of France President to India, and in this background we will be discussing about the India-France ties and the recent deals out of the same. In the next one we will be looking at a very important issue arising out of the Calcutta High Court. And here we will be understanding the theme of what is politicization of the Indian judiciary. In the next one, we will be looking at the Indo-Myanmar issue of border fencing, because recently a Northeast Chief Minister, he said about the various apprehensions that he has regarding the border fencing dispute. In the next one, we will be looking at the various dimensions and the various contributors of the artists, of the painters, of the calligraphists who were involved in framing the original copies of the Indian Constitution. And finally, we will be wrapping up the discussion with the recent find of a golden tiger in the National Park of Kaziranga in Assam. Now, before starting the very discussion, I want to wish you all a belated Happy Republic Day, where India witnessed its 75th Republic Day. And with the same background only, we are seeing that the recent visit of the French President to India also is very significant for our examination. Why? Because in the mains syllabus of GS2, we need to look about the bilateral, regional and global groupings which are concerning Indian interests. Now this is very significant because the French President visited India, and also the India-France ties are in the news. And this is also following the same thing about the recent deals regarding the defense sectors, the spec sectors, the industrial sectors concerning both nations. Now here, let us walk through very few basics of the partnership between India and France before going on to the recent deals signed. Now see, India and France shares a long relationship of healthy relationships, right? Now here we have to understand, since India became independent in 1947, France was one of the very first countries to set up direct diplomatic relations with the new found nation, that is India. It started, the two countries started its relationships in 1948, and we have to understand that after that, the level of cooperation, the level of relationships between the two nations was elevated to that of a strategic partnership in 1998. And also I want to highlight that among the European nations countries, France was the first country to elevate its relationships to a strategic partnership with India. And this is very significant because, the two nations have huge amount of diaspora between them, have huge amount of technological cooperation, economic cooperation between them. And I want to highlight also that the two nations are also within the top 5 nations when it comes to the economic size and might. In terms of PPP, France and India are in the top 5 nations around the world, and this is very significant primarily right now because India is also aiming to grow and also enhances GDP beyond the $5 trillion mark, and here nations such as US, France and so on will be helping India into achieving that threshold. And right now we have to understand that there are some few pillars of this relationship between India and France. The very first pillar is the defense pillar. Now we have to understand that France and India are major defense partners. In fact, after Russia, France is one of the top defense exporters to India. Because we have to understand there is an agreement on defense cooperation which was signed in the early 2000s and which was also later extended to further 10 years. And right now this is the threshold and this is the cornerstone of the defense agreements between the two countries. And we have to also understand that in Indian DRDO, it also set up office at Indian Embassy in 2023. This signals that the level of importance that India places with France on defense imports is very important. Next, also we have heard that the Rafale fighter jets were also imported from France, and this is also adding more and more power to Indian Air Force. Next, we have to understand with respect to space, our ISRO and France's CNES, they are collaborating on various projects. projects starting from, say, lunar exploration, satellite launches, and so on. One of the examples of satellite launches was the launch of GSAT-24, which is India's communication satellite from French Guiana. So we have to understand this is the level of cooperation that the two nations have. Next is a very, very important one with respect to nuclear cooperation, because we have to understand India have been neglected by most of the Western powers, most of the Western nations with respect to nuclear diplomacy. And in 2008, the USA, the United States of America, took the first step in bringing India into the fold of global nuclear order. This was the very first step taken by the USA. Now, the France and the Japan nations would follow the same after that. So it signals that France is also extending its nuclear support to India. And we have to understand that with reference to Jaitapur nuclear power project, France is directly contributing. Also, the small modular reactors and the advanced modular reactors agreement between the two nations are also there, and it is expected that the nuclear cooperation can only increase from the next few years. Next, we have to understand the economic cooperation. When we are talking about money, the total trade between the two nations comes up to be cumulatively around $13.4 billion. And this is a very, very large number for both of the nations. We have to understand that is why both of the countries have a big emphasis on the economic ties. So, also we have to understand France is the 11th largest source of FDI, amounting to around 5 to 10 billion dollars, right? Then also with reference to the IT corridors, smart city missions in India and France, then also the amount of railway cooperation, railway technology, and the emergency features in our Indian railways, they are also being partnerships. There are also many partnerships with France on the same. Then we have to also look at the skilling opportunities and various other employment opportunities that Indian seeks in the France nation. These are also very, very significant. And here we have to understand the recent outcomes of the same after understanding the pillars of defense, diplomacy, and so on. Now, the very first deal which have been signed is the India-France Defense Industrial Partnership. This partnership is, totally focused on to finding the areas of cooperation between the two nations. Specifically on what? Specifically on manufacturing military equipment. Right? Now, apart from military equipment, they are also focused on cutting edge technologies like what? Like robotics, artificial intelligence, autonomous vehicles, platforms, and also cyber defense, because these are the key strategic technologies of the next age. And also, we have to understand that in the next 50 to 100 years, these will be the technologies which will be dominating our day-to-day lives. And that is why India is also focused on the same, and France is also collaborating on India on doing the same, because we have to understand India is having the world's largest population, and its large population is a sitting resource that all of the world's countries want to tap in, be it market, be it labor, be it the skilling ecosystem in India. We have to understand that is why France is also signing on strategic technological alliances and partnership under the garb of India-France Defense Industrial Partnership. And here in this, we have to understand both air and space technologies are involved, and within these the maritime technology is also there, including underwater domain awareness, because we have to understand with the rise of China's presence in our own Indian Ocean and also in oceans all around the world, China is trapping nations such as Sri Lanka in debt, and also China is sending its own vehicles, both military and merchant, into the foreign seas to grab influence in those areas. And this is one of the reasons why India and France is also committed of increasing its awareness in the maritime region. And this is also one of the things that were discussed yesterday. Next, also we have to understand about the defense space partnership that the two countries have sought to announce in the coming few days. Next, also the private sector of the two nations are coming together, namely the Airbus and Tata, which are focused on H-125 helicopter deal, which will be strengthening both the military and also the civilian needs. Next, with reference to procurements that India will do from France, right? One of the biggest procurement that India did in the previous few years was the Rafale, and India intends to continue the same with 26 more Rafale procurement from the France. And also this is to strengthen the Indian Navy's aircraft carriers. Again, aircraft carriers are located in marine waters, which signifies that India is poised to combat Chinese ambitions in the sea. Next, India also wants to induct more 3 additional Scorpion class conventional submarines. This is also signaling the same focus in the area. Also, apart from China, we have to understand that there are other countries in the region such as Pakistan, which is also belligerent and also spending a lot on its military and marine awareness too. Next, and this is a very significant one, which is given the name of Young Professional Scheme, which intends to exchange students and individuals between the age of 18 to 35 years from India to France, because according to our Prime Minister and also the French President, according to their statements, they state that India is a sitting resource of human resource, and that is why France wants to tap in the same. That is why France wants to exchange students, wants to skill them, wants to educate them, wants to give them higher studies and jobs in Paris, and that is why France is focused on the same in India. And also apart from this, the students, Indian students who are in France and pursuing master's degree there, they're also given a recent amount of visa extension for the same. This is signifying the amount of healthy relationships that India and France have between themselves. And also, in face of the global challenges of climate change, of global security order, nuclear order, rise of China, economic warfare, and a lot of other issues, that is what we have to understand, that amidst all of these, India and France, the relations between the two nations are still strong together. These are also highlighted by some more facts, such as the Namaste France campaign that India ran, which is a form of a cultural festival which was hosted in several cities of France since 2016. And this is aim for what? This is aim for increasing India's soft power with France. Also with respect to the various Bollywood movies and songs which are widely popular in France, and also the popularity of French movies in India, these are also signifying or significance of the soft power between the two nations. Next, France recently announced that 2026 will be the India-France year of innovation, and this is to promote what? To promote more and more research in artificial intelligence, defense, and also to encourage the growth of startups, potentially because the two nations are within the top 5 countries economically according to the PPP terms, and these particular countries would want to increase the same. Next, France also introduced a very interesting thing, which is the introduction of UPI payments at the Eiffel Tower in Paris. So this is also a very good gesture from the two nations. And finally, we have to understand that the setting up of diplomatic missions and consulates is also a very significant marker for healthy relationships, such as India's consulate in Marseille and the French Bureau de France was also set up in Hyderabad, culminating in the healthy relations between the two. And that is why we have to understand that France is also a very important strategic partner for India. So this was all for this article. In the next one, we will be looking at a very interesting development that is coming in from the Calcutta High Court. Now, according to the various reports and the sources in the media, it has been found out, and there have been also allegations that there is a conflict going on between a High Court judge, that means the Calcutta High Court judge, versus another Calcutta High Court judge. Now this conflict is between what? One judge, specifically Abhijit Gangopadhyay, he is alleging that the other judge, Shomin Shane, is indulging in political favoritism. That means Abhijit Gangopadhyay is alleging that his own colleague in the High Court is involved in being in one camp of the ruling political party in West Bengal. And we need not go into the specifics of the case and everything, but we have to understand one single theme that is arising from this discussion, that is the politicization of our judiciary. We have heard about politicization of criminals, right? Because we have come across the terms such as criminal MPs and so on, who are having criminal cases against themselves and they are sitting in the parliament and making laws for us. Now here, the context is different. It is signifying that there can be some instances where the major ruling party at the center or at the states can influence the judicial operations, the judicial functioning at the high courts, at the district courts, and even at the Supreme Court level. So this is why we have to understand this is a very interesting article and very important for our GS2 mains, where we have to discuss about the structure, organization and functioning, which is the case of concern here of the judiciary. Now, starting with the same, we need to know what is politicization of judiciary at the very beginning. I have introduced the very case in the very beginning, and again I want to state that it is the influence of political considerations on the functioning of the Indian judiciary or judiciary anywhere. Now, we have to understand that India is a democratic country, and the health of a democracy depends on what? Its constitutions, its functionaries and its institutions. And what are these institutions? These are the executive, right? Namely the president, prime minister, right? This is the legislature, the parliament, the state legislative assemblies, and also the other organ of the government, that is the judiciary. Now, the health of any democracy will be primarily contingent on the health of these three pillars, and we have to understand that judiciary is the main feature of democracy because it is the protector of our rights. Judiciary gives protection from any malpractice, from any issue that is arising out of the exercising of our rights, including the fundamental rights. And in Indian Constitution, it is also guaranteed that the Supreme Court, that the High Court, namely the Indian judiciary, is the guarantor of the fundamental rights in India. And here we have to understand that the same politicization or in exerting influence of the political parties or political agenda on the institution of judiciary or any particular judge can severely harm the nation. And we have to explore as to how this particular thing can happen at the very first place. How can politicization of judiciary can happen? This can happen through many ways. The very first way we have to understand is very personal in nature. It is very personal in nature because according to Paul Leahy, right, who was a judge, he quoted that a judge is a lawyer who is a politician who has a friend. That means primarily, mostly the judges in India at the High Court and Supreme Court, they have been lawyers at some point of their lives, right? They have been advocates, and while practicing as advocates, they were in touch with various clients of various professions. One of those professions could be politicians, right? Now those politicians can be close friends with the judge. Now don't you think this will be bearing on the judge based on their integrity, based on their conflict of interest, right, based on their fortitude and so on. So the judges needs to be of high moral caliber, right? They have to be highly ethical, they have to be a person of highest integrity, and that is why we have to understand the very first reason of politicization is personal in nature, because unless and until you as a judge will be ethical, right, you will be protected from politicization. Otherwise, it is not possible. So the very first thing is maintaining that personal level of ethics. Next, it is also sometimes concerned with the appointment of judges by overruling judiciary by the executive sometimes. A prominent example is the appointment of Justice M.H. Beg by Indira Gandhi, overruling the then Chief Justice of India. So these particular events when the executive can meddle in the appointment of the judges is very harmful. Next, there can be various pressures on the judges of the day. How? It can be an instance that a politician through hate speech, through propaganda, through media reports is falsifying or say putting pressure on the judge who is say deliberating on a very important case in the judiciary. And this can take the forms of say threat on lives and liberty and also life and protection of the family members of the judge. So this is one of the pressure. Then we have to understand that there can be instances and there are instances where the judiciary is itself not transparent. And the collegium system is one of the primary examples of the same, because the very functioning of the collegium system is very opaque. It does not, the public outside do not know how the collegium system occurs. And if the public does not know, the information is not there, how can the public have oversight on the same? oversight on the judiciary. Now this is another cause of concern where potential loopholes can creep into politicization of the judiciary, primarily into these appointment cases. Next, also we have to understand that this is not a very good reason, but this is one of the reasons why politicization of judiciary is very, very high at the lower courts. At the lower courts, because the lower courts judges, they suffer from low competitive salaries and also poor working condition for judges, especially the women judges who do not even have functional toilets according to the recent Chief Justice of India. So this is a cause of concern, and these are the direct and indirect reasons as to why politicization takes place. And what are the impacts of the same? The very first impact is a weakening of the rule of the law. This rule of the law will be favoring the powerful in against the favor of the people who must be treated equally. And this is a case where you have to understand the political authority, the political parties can have a free hand in the exercise of the, authority of the judiciary. Next, the independence and impartiality of judiciary. The judiciary is actually, most famous and also most, exertive in its function with reference to the independence and impartiality it has. If this particular event takes place, this totally goes out of the window. Next, this is also undermining the checks and balances and also defeats the purpose of separation of power. This means that judiciary has a function of checking and balancing some of the excretions and also some of the excesses done by the executive or legislature. If the judges or judiciaries themselves are compromised, then this function is not done. Similarly, if the executive is transgressing on judiciary, right, it is defeating the separation of powers between the organs of the democracy. Then we have to understand, if judges are compromised politically, where will the public go? Where will the common public go? Because we have to understand that judges are very, very powerful individuals because they have the judicial authority. And if they misuse the judicial authority, the people, the common people, they cannot go anywhere. Their trust in the institution will decrease over a period of time, and if this sustains, this will also impact India's reputation, because we have to understand, be it any sector of the economy, an economy functions on the effective dispute redressal mechanism, and if the dispute redressal mechanism such as the judiciary are themselves compromised, this can hurt India's reputation domestically and also internationally. So that is why this particular thing is very, very serious. And here we have to understand how high courts and supreme courts can become political using some practical examples. See, Supreme Court is the final arbiter of all political disputes, and if a Supreme Court judge or a Chief Justice of Supreme Court, right, are involved in any allegations of politicization, they can compromise with their own integrity. Next, we have to understand the political and ideological positions of judges are also very, very significant, because I told that at a very personal level, the judges can have their own beliefs and ideologies. And if those ideologies are having some connection with any political party of the day, then that particular judge is totally compromised, and you cannot expect any degree or quality of justice from the same. Next, the High Courts and Supreme Court are regularly drawn into the politics of the ruling and opposition parties through various cases. Some cases are, some examples are the ADM Jabalpur case, which everyone knows, right? This is one of the reasons why Indira Gandhi is also infamous right now due to the emergency. Next, the SR Bombay case, while it, is a very, very significant case for us, but there was a, instance where the governments of the, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan and, Himachal Pradesh, they were suspended. And this is also one of the angles which were seen and examined and found out that maybe some instance of this judgment was politically motivated. Next, we also find out that the opposition parties were crying out about the Rafale deal between France and India and how the particular deal was signed. Then the Pegasus discussion regarding the spying of various prominent individuals in India, and also the ongoing Saif Shana case, which we have to understand these are cases which are triggered mainly by the opposition parties, and rightfully so. Cases must be triggered and cases must be discussed on, but here, if there are any hint of any political ideologies by the judiciary, these particular cases and the outcomes of the same can be compromised as seen in the top two cases. Next, we also understand that there are various public interest litigation which are often not in public interest but in political interest, such as the litigations regarding the anti-conversion law, the universal civil code, right? And there are many other examples where the Supreme Court or the High Courts can fall prey to this political power play. Here, I want to state that despite all these allegations, right, the judiciary as an institution since independence in India has prevailed, and the faith and the belief of the Indians on its working is also, unwavering. Because you have to understand, any institutions depends on the quality of their leaders. And the leaders have maintained, the leaders here are judges themselves, they have maintained high level of professional, ethics. There are instances, there will be exceptions, but overall we have to understand that the Indian judiciary has stood the test of the time, because there have been some cases, the very significant case of Keshwananda Bharati case, right, which gave us the basic structure of the constitution. There have been brave judges, such as the judges involved in the Raj Narayan cases, which suspended the elections of the Prime Minister back then, that is Indira Gandhi, right. Then there are rare cases in or during emergencies, right, of India, when 9 High Courts in India upheld the right to habeas corpus against illegal detention done by the state. So what are all these? This shows the courage. This shows the fortitude. This shows the level of integrity. This shows the level of professional integrity and ethics, right? This shows the level of ethical conduct, or say the amount of ethical qualities that the Indian judges have. And rightfully so, the test of time has been prevailed. Now, also apart from this, as recently we have to understand, the Supreme Court is also deliberating and also deliberated some of the very politically contested cases, such as the cases on electoral bonds and Article 370 and so on. In both of these cases and many of these cases, Supreme Court has shown the courage to take its stance and decide on the outcome of these cases, rightfully so. And here, the focus should be on improving the functioning of the judiciary, because coming back to the current affairs again, that is the case of the Calcutta High Court judges, that is the judge versus judge controversy. We have to understand, rightfully so, the Supreme Court intervened. The Supreme Court intervened here, and right now it is also hearing the cases, and the next hearing will be taking place somewhere later in the month. It will be hearing the cases, and we have to understand that the Supreme Court will be, hearing the cases and making amendments, and the main culprit or the main issue at hand will be identified. In the next one, we will be looking at the Indo-Myanmar border fencing debate that is going on, which is kind of causing some issues in the northeastern states of India, and particularly the Nagaland Chief Minister is flagging the centre's move to fence Myanmar's border, and the Chief Minister is telling that there should be a lot of thorough discussions before actually fencing our borders. Now let me tell you, as of now, India is having fenced borders, or borders with proper fences and proper boundaries, right, and also proper border apparatus with 2 nations only, that is Pakistan and Bangladesh, right. India has properly fenced borders with these 2 nations, and we have to understand that with respect to GS3 and the various security apparatus and issues in the northeast and India overall, we have to discuss in the context of Myanmar today. And also, according to the same, there was a previous year question in 2021 mains relating directly the Indian-Myanmar borders, right? Now here, let us discuss the same. See, India and Myanmar is having a border of around 1600 kilometers, and most of the border is an open border. Now what is an open border? Open border is a particular boundary between two nations where the people of the two nations are not having any barriers such as visa and passport and so on to enter and exit the borders. Now these open borders between India and Myanmar is also based and contingent on some reasons. Now we'll be looking at the same. See, but before that we have to know about the background of the same. Recently the center has decided to fence the entire length, that is the 1643 kilometers of the borders between India and Myanmar, because they want to stop the free movement of the people. It will be fenced like the Bangladesh border, and the government is reconsidering something. That something is known as the free movement regime. This free movement regime was very popular in 2018 when the Prime Minister of India announced the same. Now what is that? Before that again we need another background. The background is that when the British was ruling India, British did some various unpopular decisions, and one of the unpopular decisions was the demarcation of the borders between India and Myanmar back then. Back then it was known as Burma. So what they did in 1826, they divided the borders between the two nations randomly, right? And this led to what? This led to the division of some tribal populations, some ethnic populations, right? And these divisions was actually taking place in two nations, such as, for example, there can be a tribe A which was situated on the border, and after this, say 40% of the tribe A population was in India, 60% was in Myanmar. So ethnically and culturally they were divided on two nations, but on the basis of their culture they are the same. And also they have strong family relationships, we have to understand. And that is why still now we can see that there are various tribal communities, there are ethnic communities in both nations, bordering the border villages of the two nations, who have strong ties between them. Apart from this, we have to understand economy, right? Money is the thing that bind communities over long periods of time. And also we have to understand the same case is here. The border villages in the border towns, right, or say the border areas of India and Myanmar are very less developed. Whatever the trade and commerce takes place is due to the demand and supply forces taking place in the border areas. And if there will be a border or say fenced border, we have to understand that thing will be totally restricted. Trade and commerce will totally stop. They will be requiring permissions, customs and so on. So that is why we have to understand as of now, right, we have to understand these particular things are very important. And we have to also appreciate one thing, that there are many people and there are many communities from Myanmar who comes into India for education and healthcare. Through this open border, this will also be stopped. And that is why say in 2018, right, when India was focusing on its policy, right, its policy was actually announced much before that 2018, it focused on the development of the northeast areas, taking the help of the Southeast Asian nations such as Myanmar, Cambodia, Vietnam and so on. So a very important part of the policy of East policy was this particular regime, this free movement regime. This free movement regime was mutually agreed between India and Myanmar in 2018, and this allowed what? This allowed the tribals living across the borders to go to either side and travel up to 16 kilometers inside the other country without any visa. So this particular regime allowed these particular tribals only, not anyone else, to go as far as 16 kilometers in and out without requiring visa, because they had families, they had communities, they need to interact via trade and commerce. So this particular thing was actually encouraged. Now we have to understand this particular regime is being criticized right now. Now to understand this also we need to look at some background. See, this particular regime came into place in 2017-18. Back then India and Myanmar were having very good relationships, but after the COVID pandemic took place and in 2021, the relations were a kind of reset, Why? Because in 2021, the Janta, right, the Janta took a military coup in Myanmar, right? Due to the military coup, it led to the persecution of various communities, including Rohingyas, Kukis, and so on. But focusing our discussion mainly on the northeast state of say Mizoram, Manipur, Nagaland, and so on, we have to understand that this particular military coup displaced a lot of Kuki Chin peoples, and this displacement led to their illegal migration in India. Now, there were some states which were not too much disturbed with the illegal migrants, such as the state of Mizoram, who generously set up camps to accommodate as far as 10,000, 20,000 of Kuki peoples in their states. But you have to understand, whenever an outsider comes, in a particular region, particularly in tribal areas, the tribal areas who were residents before would not be very happy. And the same thing took place in Manipur. We know that Manipur violence is taking place for a long period of time. Particularly, this has been flaring up since the last year. And the story starts when the military coup in Myanmar would displace these Kuki-Chin people. Now, after their displacement, we saw that some states like Mizoram warmly welcomed them, right? They settled them. But in some villages of Manipur, right, they were not welcomed. The Manipuri people and the tribal peoples, particularly the tribal peoples in the Imphal Valley and also the hilly peoples, they were not happy with this illegal migration. And while they were not very happy, there were some village chiefs, there were some village head people who showed their benevolence to this particular Kuki peoples. Now these village chiefs did what? They settled them in particular hills. Now these hills became their new home. After they became their new home, they started cutting down trees and utilizing the local resources in the areas. Now, this particular activity enraged the other tribal communities and ethnic communities in the Imphal Valley. And this led to the eviction drive violence between the Kuki and the Metis. Right? We know that the Metis people of Manipur reside in the valley regions, and the Kukis were the people who were settled in the hills by these village chiefs. Now, the Manipuri government, there have been some allegations, have been evicting these Kuki individuals, and this is the ongoing Manipuri conflict. And we have to understand this free regime movement is actually told to be one of the reasons fueling this particular conflict. Right? The Metis have accused these particular Kuki Chin people of narco-terror network, such as promoting drugs, cartels, weapons, and so on. And the Kukis are alleging that the Metis are using this particular reason as a pretext for ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing refers to that particular condition when a particular ethnic group is totally hell-bent on killing the other group based on ethnical lines. And this is the particular issue which is going on, and I told you the free movement regime is actually attributed as one of the reasons for the same. Apart from the same, this particular regime is also, according to some experts, promoting some insurgent groups such as UNLF, right, the PLA, ULFA, the NSCN, and some communities from the Kukis and Zomis to set up camps at Sagyang, Kashin, and Shin, where these particular groups are involved in what? Sheltering various insurgents, in giving arms to them, training their cadres, smuggling drugs, and also selling weapons to the rest of the Indian states. And also they are having connections with some insurgent groups as far as Kashmir and also in particular regions of Maoist affected regions of India. Next, this particular area is thickly forested, the terrain is very, very challenging, and also we have to understand mostly are unfenced, right? Only around 6 kilometers in Manipur is fenced, but that also not properly. Almost all of the border is totally unfenced, and it is very, very difficult to monitor the same. That is why this particular debate is ongoing, that the center is proposing to set up a fence, but again there will be issues. right? There will be issues that some people who are having families, who are having communities, they cannot go, say, anymore to their villages. They will be now permanently, say, divided from, say, open borders to fence borders. Many experts agree that this particular regime needs better regulation, not fencing. We can set up better regulation using satellite maps, technology, and so on, but not, particular fences, because given the interest of the local population, neither complete removal of FMR is advised nor full fencing is advised. So better regulation must be there, better deployment of security forces with proper, humane conditions, and also the use of technology must be particularly focused on these regions. In the next one, we will be looking at the artwork, the various artworks of our Indian Constitution. The context is that recently the 75th Republic Day took place, and here we need to look a little more about the background of the constitutions. Here we are not looking at the historical background of the constitution, as I know all of my friends are very aware of the history of the constitutional evaluation over a period of years, but here we will be looking at the art and cultural aspect of the same, as to who painted them and a little bit of the history of the Indian Constitution, right? And here the main focus is our UPSC prelims, which is concerning history of India and the Indian national movement here. Now see, the Constitution of India have two copies in Hindi and English. Now what are these copies? Back when the Constitution Assembly was, say, deliberating on, say, what would be the articles, clauses, sub-articles and so on, the various parts of the constitutions and so on, right? Another group of individuals were given the task, the very interesting task of designing the constitution, right? Now this designing of the constitution would generally take place through beautiful calligraphy, that is handwritten constitution, and also the beautiful depiction of paintings from Indian art and culture, history and so on. Now here we have to understand all 22 parts of the constitution have hand painted images and elaborate borders and calligraphies. Now the main contributors to the constitution, we need to look at some of the names, that is the contributors. The very first we have to look at the level of calligraphy. Calligraphy refers to the beautiful art of writing, any particular text. And also you have to understand, you must have looked at our Indian Constitution, which is the original version. It is totally handwritten, right? It was handwritten by Prem Bihari Narayan Raizada. He was actually a student of St. Stephen's College in Delhi, and Prime Minister back then, Jawaharlal Nehru, himself contacted him for writing the entire constitution using, beautiful calligraphy. Apart from this was the text side. Now looking at the picture and the painting side, Nandlal Bose of Shantiniketan and his team, consisting of various prominent artists back then, right, such as Kripal Singh Shekhawat, A. Perumal, right, Dhirendra Krishna Dev Burman. These were actually the famous artists back then who painted the images in the Indian Constitution, right? Apart from this, the preamble page was beautifully and intricately decorated by Beohar Ram Manohar Sinha. Then the national emblem and the lion capital of Ashoka was also, designed by Dinanath Bhargava. So it does not, take too much effort to remember such names, because this particular news came in the newspaper, and also there can be some questions in prelims which can maybe playing with some of the names here. So please do note these things down in your notes, and also these things are also there in the handout, so no need to worry about noting down also if you don't want to. Okay, now here I want all of you to look at the various artworks, or say the various paintings. The very first painting in the Indian Constitution is there in the part 1, that is the Union and its territory, that is concerning the bull seal from the Indus Valley civilization, as you can see here. This is the pictorial representation. These are the elaborate borders that you can look at, and this is a beautiful calligraphy. You can look, you can zoom in the video and look and admire. I am also encouraging all of you to go to Google and look for all, the original copy of the Constitution and admire of the beauty. Talking of the beauty and the beautiful paintings, right? We can understand these are the many paintings here. If you can see, sometimes you can see an amount of chronological consistency also in the same, such as the part 3 is having Ram, Lakshman and Sita returning home after defeating Ravan. Then the later part, specifically the part 4, the DPSP, the Directive Principle of State Policy, which gives the inspiration to the state for carving various welfare policies is containing the image of Arjun and Krishna before the Kurukshetra war. Following, we will be having many paintings related to Buddha, Mahavir, Emperor Ashoka, King Vikramaditya, the sculptures from Mahabalipuram and the descent of Ganga to earth. I want all of you to comment where will you find this Mahabalipuram and descent of Ganga in your historical significance. You comment and let me know. Then also we have various images of, Chhatrapati Shivaji, Guru Gobind Singh. Rani Lakshmi Bai is the only woman who is there in the constitution, via painting, right? Then also we have Tipu Sultan. We have Mahatma Gandhi appearing twice. Apart from this, all of these particular individuals are appearing only once. Then we have Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose in the background of mountains and particularly the Azad Hind Force. And also finally we have three landscapes signifying the landscapes there in our national anthem, prominently as a tribute to Rabindranath Tagore, the Nobel laureate. So these are all the individuals, the events which are there painted in our Indian constitution, and it is a very beautiful piece to admire and look at. Finally, we will be concluding our discussion with the golden tiger which was recently captured at Kaziranga National Park. This is very, very important for our environment and ecology in our prelims. Now see, we know that tigers have various colors on their bodies, right? Mainly the main colors are what? Black, orange and white. And you know why these colors are important for the tigers? These colors are very, very important for them to blend in the grasses in the wild, right? Because they want to properly be very quiet while they are preying. And these particular stripes of black, orange and the white that they have on their breast and stomach, they also have this amount of various colors. But there are some special tigers, right, who do not have the same colors here. Sometimes they can have some faded black color, some more orange colors, some totally absent white colors, some totally absent orange colors. These are actually due to the mutations or the genetic alterations taking place at the DNA level in particular some tigers. This is particularly, a very common thing because we find many variants of tigers, right? We have found white tigers, we know about the Maltese tigers, we know about the pseudo-Milanese tiger, then also some pseudo-black white tigers too. So this is a particular example of this golden tiger. Look at how beautiful this particular majestic beast is, right? Admire at the beauty. And here, let me tell you, this is not a natural, or say regular tiger. This is a mutated or a particular tiger who is having some genetic variant in the same. Now, some facts about tigers. They are endangered under the IUCN and also they belong to Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. Things to be remembered because tigers are a favorite topic for UPSC to ask almost say every 2-3 years. Now finally, let us look at the map of the Kaziranga National Park where this particular tiger was actually photographed. See, the river Brahmaputra is passing through the northern part of the national park here. Then we have Mora Dhansiri river, we have Deepu river, we have various other rivers which are crisscrossing this particular plains of Kaziranga. And here we have find many, animals such as tigers, rhinoceros, and so on. And making this particular region a very, very rich and culturally, a particular heritage site for the nation. This was all for today. I thank you all for being very, very patient today. After this, there will be a quiz which I advise all of you to please do attempt because prelims is near. With this, I thank you all again and till then, till next, thank you, all the best.